So on page 26 here of this, whatever, this Chaveres, and we're learning the background to the Rambam takes a very relatively strict position that women are disqualified from any minui. What was the lashon? Let's make sure we get the lashon right. Only a man can be appointed to a position of authority. Now we need to delineate this much more clearly as to what this means and why. There's a bunch of different reasons are given as to what the Rambam might mean, and we're just going to skim over them. I actually only want to pick out one really interesting one. Look on page 26, number 7. The point of, and this definitely is not politically correct, and in fact, there might even be an argument to say, on the basis of this svara that we're going to learn, that things may possibly have changed. This is from the Baal Aruch HaShulchan, right? But he also wrote a sefer called Aruch HaShulchan Ha'osid. Don't know if you knew that? Yeah, you can get hold of it. Don't wait for the Netflix documentary, you know. He wrote Aruch HaShulchan Ha'osid because Aruch HaShulchan was basically like the Shulchan Aruch on halachos which are negeya, are relevant and are practical and applicable today. He also wrote on things such as kodshim, which are for, that's why he called it Aruch HaShulchan Ha'osid. Okay? And there in Hilchos Malachim, he writes the following. Look at Zion. Al pi hanema b'halacha haba, ein memanin lemelech misheyesh legabav chashash sheha'om yezalzel b'hanhagosai. There is an idea that one should not appoint somebody to the position that demeans the position. Somebody that does not have the, in English there's a great word, and it's from the Latin, I don't know if you're familiar with this, gravitas. Come across that word? Somebody has the gravitas. It means he has the, it's not, yes, he has the dignity that he is respectable. That people look at that person and say, yeah, fits the office. Trump, you know, really, I'm joking. Biden, I'm joking. Whatever, it doesn't matter. The concept of somebody who is in a position of leadership shouldn't be a clown, shouldn't be a person who is who doesn't behave in a respectable manner. Respect is something, in English you say respect is commanded, not demanded. It's just by virtue of your personality and the way you behave, and you have that integrity that people... So the idea might be, sorry, I just want to finish this and I'll come to you, Gabby. The Shulchan, the Aruch HaShulchan Ha'osid, the Aruch HaShulchan suggests that maybe the pshat is that Noshim and possibly Geirim, if we appoint somebody who the tzibur are not going to take seriously, if we appoint somebody who is not going to command the respect of the tzibur for some reason, that's how the Rav Epstein understands pshat in the Rambam. And therefore I hesitate at some level, assuming that we are able to say, if that's the Tama Dikra, then maybe there's an argument to say in a society where you have an Angela Merkel and you had a Margaret Thatcher and you had the notion of women being in senior positions in the concept of a woman who you got a favorite German female politician? Okay, yeah. In English we have a saying for that sort of person. It's a compliment, a battle axe. A battle, milchama, an axe. Battle axe. In other words, there's a woman you don't want to mess with. So it could be, maybe. I don't know whether this, but it caught my eye, this svara, and I just wanted to share it. Now, let's begin to dissect one of the most important tshuvas on this subject, and that is the tshuva of Rav Moshe Feinstein about, I mentioned it yesterday, a woman who wants to be, has applied for a job to be a mashgicha in kashrus, okay? So we're not going to go through the whole tshuva. There's a summary of the tshuva here. Never, by the way, trust summaries of tshuvas very much. Always, if you really want to use it properly, you have to do it in the original. But I didn't want to go through the whole original. But this is not a substitute. You've got the Maramokim here over the page. So if you want to really quote it and do it in the original. So Rav Moshe is matir this woman to act as a mashgiach and kashrus, and he has a few nimukim. He has a number of ideas that he bases his position on. Aleph, bottom of the page. The Rambam hu aposik hayochid shenokat l'isur. The Rambam is the only posek against the das of Tosfos and other Rishonim that this idea that women are not qualified, they're not valid to serve generally in positions of power. Remember, there are Gemaras about whether a woman definitely can't be an aide. On that there is no, and the shaila is what about a woman being a dayan? Because usually, as it says in the Mishnah, the two are connected. Anybody who is posel lahoid is posel lodum. And this is something we're going to get to very shortly. But the Rambam, the main chiddush of the Rambam, let's not forget, is that he extends this concept from melech v'loy malka, which we found is a medrash. He extends it to kol minoi. That's his own chiddush. He doesn't tell us what the makor is. Says the Rav Moshe, given that the Rambam is the only posek, he's a yochid, who says this, and it could be, one could possibly paskin like the others, poskim will argue with him, lukula. Interesting. For that, by the way, one would need to really decide whether the Rambam is being machmer midoraisa or is it only midrabanan. You see, that's going to be really important. Either way, says the Rav Moshe, since there are many Rishonim argue with him, and he is the das yochid, beyichud b'mikra zug boy hamaduba be'isha almona has kukala parnosa. Rav Moshe takes into account that the person that has applied for this job is an almona who needs parnosa, and therefore, on that basis, we can be mitzvah it to say to the other, say the Rambam is a das yochid, and we can possibly follow the others. Secondly, im ma'asikim es hamashgiach derech harabanut v'loy be'emtzos balabayis. Let's just talk about kashrus for a second. There is a saying in English. Okay, no, forget the saying in English. Here's a fact for you, which is something that you perhaps should be aware of. Have you heard of the saying, big pharma? Pharma. Have you ever heard of that saying, big pharma? No. Okay, so big pharma, you've heard it. Good. So big pharma is like AstraZeneca, Glaxo, SmithKline Beecham, all the big, many of them are German, interestingly. Any of the big, Procter & Gamble, whatever, any of the big pharmaceutical companies, it's a massive business. Drugs, pharmaceuticals is a multi-trillion dollar business. It's massive. Who pays for the research to develop those drugs? You should not be hesitating to answer. The pharmaceutical companies themselves. Okay. And therefore there is immense pressure. They spend millions, if not hundreds of millions, if not possibly billions, I don't know, but certainly hundreds of millions in researching. They have massive R&D, research and development facilities, because they're always looking for the next big thing. Right, because after a time it goes out of license, then it becomes generic, and they can't make the money anymore. Right, you patent it, etc. So they're always looking for the next drug for cancer, for diabetes, for whatever. It's not because they're such amazingly beautiful, wonderful people want to help everybody as much as their advertising might want you to think that. Mm-hmm. Of course not. They're in it to make money, very obviously. But they conduct all the clinical trials, and then they present them, say in America, to the FDA. And here's an interesting fact for you, and this is I've got a very interesting book at home called Science Fictions, and there is a lot of evidence, and this I can, it's nothing to do with what we're learning, but it's a really fascinating topic, and that is, did you know that it is close to 80% of the clinical trials upon which major and important drugs are based cannot be reproduced? There's what's known as the reproducibility crisis. Do you understand what that means?
They cannot reproduce.
They can't be reproduced to get the same results. In other words,
chemical? No.
Yeah. In other words, and I really don't want to. I'll send you some stuff to read. It's really interesting. In other words, what's the point that I'm making? The point that I'm making is when you have a vested interest in the process, a financial interest in the process itself, it is, to some extent, it becomes suspect, right? So it's actually a problem. It is a problem. It is a problem. Why is that relevant to what we're discussing?
You're saying the almana was...
So what? No.
Okay.
What I'm saying is as follows. Let's talk about kashrus. If I am the owner of a restaurant and I hire a mashgiach, do you see a conflict of interest?
How about you're the mashgiach yourself? Even worse?
Yeah. But if you were to hire a mashgiach, then the mashgiach knows if you don't like him, you'll fire him. And if he is too machmir and he's taking too long to check the lettuces, or he says this is no good and I've got to throw it out, and you face a real financial... That is why most, if not all, as far as I'm aware, reputable hashgacha... How does a hashgacha work in a restaurant, or how it should work? It's very simple. Let's take, for example, London Based In. They were going to give a hechsher on a restaurant. They go in, they do all their research, they look at all the processes, they sign a contractual agreement with the licensee, what they can bring in, what they can't bring in, and depending on the type of restaurant, is it milchik, is it fleishik, do they need a mashgiach tamidi, whatever. But the mashgiach is hired by London Based In. The rest of the licensee pays a fee to London Based In. And that's how it should be. You've created distance. You've created integrity and objectivity in the process. The guy has no problem throwing out, if he throws out too many lettuce leaves, the licensee might not like it, but it's too bad because the licensee is not his employer, London Based In is. And if they close down, then he'll get a job, he'll go to another restaurant kind of thing. So you've created, you hear this, there's an integrity in the process. Rav Moshe is, and that's just good for your general knowledge, and it's an important idea. It's relevant here because Rav Moshe is using this as a loophole. I don't know if that's the right word. I don't mean it in that sense. To say, because what's the problem here? Power. Who really has the power? London Based In have the power. I, Mrs. X, I'm an employee of them, and I'm following their guidelines. I'm not just making it up as I go along. You're not autonomous. The notion, and this is something we're going to explore. There was a time when there was absolute power. Yes? Absolute power corrupts absolutely, as they say. Right? There was a time, well, look at Putin, for example. I think you're allowed to say that, even on YouTube. There is no question that he is an autocrat. And the whole democracy thing there is a bit of a fig leaf, right? That's power. You go back to the Tsars or whatever, that was real power. The divine right of kings, they could do whatever they wanted, pretty much, right? There is an argument to say that in democracy, there's a certain amount of power, it is true, but maybe it's not the same as the power that was referred to in the times pre-democracy, where absolute power meant you could do pretty much whatever you wanted. So Rav Moshe uses this concept, and let's see how he does it. Im ma'asikim es hamashgiach derech harabanut v'loi be'emtzoos ba'al habayis, then nishlal min hatafkid kol inyan shel sorora. Then he says we've really taken away from this woman any real power, because who's giving the hechsher? The rabbanut, the rabbin, whichever one it is that's giving the hechsher, and she has guidelines how to check lettuces. She doesn't have any autonomy. She finds some bugs, 3 bugs, chuck it out. Sorry, what are you doing, Mrs. So-and-so? Sorry, here's the 3 bugs. That's what it says in my London Based In booklet. So she's not exercising power. It's to protect her, but it also then actually removes her. So she has some control, but it's not her own control. She's given control by the Rabbanut, and it's basically them who are exercising the power. And therefore, says Rav Moshe, she's not machlit. She can't just make up her mind whatever she wants, right? And therefore, it's okay. In this case, it works to her favor. So Rav Moshe's used 2 tzedadim, and it's a good insight into the lomdas, the analysis. 2 tzedadim to say it's mutter. Number 1, it's the Rambam. Is that even if we're going along with the Rambam, is it das hayochid? Maybe for the sake of a parnos of an almona, we can paskin like the others who argue with the Rambam. And even if you want to go along with the Rambam, imtim salam like the Rambam, no position of authority. Right. This isn't really, and she has no independent, autonomous authority or sovereignty. She follows the rules, and that's it.
She doesn't have to demand kavod, right? That was because
demand what?
Kavod.
Yeah, not even going to a kavod. The Rambam doesn't use that word kavod. He uses the word minui. We said that our Shulchan suggests that maybe the kavod is the underlying rationale. Okay? Let's go on. Now we come to a very interesting subtopic here, which is, what about Devorah Hanaviyah? Devorah was one of the shoftim. She was a shofetet. Devorah was a shofet. How was that okay? And that's something we're going to see the Rishonim deal with, and this helps us have an insight into this whole process. Let's have a look. Shteit HaPosuk. Shteit HaPosuk in Shoftim. Udvoiroish ishon v'yo eishes lapidois. It's interesting. Immediately, if I was a feminist, I would read this Posuk. And by the way, Chazal, there's a Gemara on this. What does it, read this, what does it tell you? Udvoira was a Isha Neviah. Wow. Starting off really strong for women, right? She's an Isha Neviah. And the next words go and ruin it all. Eishes Lapidos. She's his chattel. She belongs to him. She's the wife of Lapidos. Who? I mean, how many Devoras were there who were Nevios? There's only been one woman with the name Devorah throughout all of time who was a Neviah. And only one woman whose name was Devorah who was a Shefetes. Oh, that Devorah! Oh, I thought you meant the other Devorah who's a Neviah and a Shefetes. So, I'm being sarcastic. So, the Torah still has to say, Eishes Lapidos. You see the patriarchy? Chazal, of course, discuss this, but not for now. But I'm just, whatever. And maybe it's Adar, so I'm allowed to be a little bit more tongue-in-cheek. No, but it's not there. It's there for a reason. It's not tongue-in-cheek. It's there for a reason, and what we need to do, ask ourselves, is why it's actually there, and for that, so Gemara, you can go and research it. He shoifto es Yisrael bo'es hahi v'yosheves tachas toimed v'yro bein ha'omo vein beisel v'arefroyim v'yalu eleha b'nei Yisrael lamishpot. People went to her, B'nai Yisrael went to her for judgment. Whoa, what is this? Some sort of Purim joke? What's going on? You know, there's a Rashi, there's a Rashi ala Torah, which caught my eye. I saw it brought somewhere. Bear with me a second. I'm going to read it out to you, just to give us a little bit of context here, and that is Rashi on the Pasuk. Hold on, let me find it. Give me a second to find it. Rashi is... Yeah. Rashi's in the beginning of Dvarim. Havu lochem anoshim chachomim unevoinim v'yeduim l'shivteichem v'asimeim barashechem. Pasuk Dvarim Perek Aleph, Pasuk Yud Gimel. Right? Havu lochem anoshim chachomim unevoinim. They should become asimeim barashechem. Says Rashi, b'shem Sifri, anoshim. Says Rashi, v'chilita le'aldat chonoshim. Would it enter your mind in a zillion years to say that the chachomim nevoinim v'yeduim should v'asimim barashechem should be women? Rashi's asking a kasha. That entire word in the Torah is superfluous. You don't need to write anoshim. Duh, to quote the Gadol Ador Homer, right? Of course. You're so from, you don't know what I'm talking about. Of course it has to be anoshim. Why say anoshim? Rashi b'shem Sifri is asking kasha. There's a word in the Torah I don't understand. Havulachem anoshim. Of course the leaders have to be men. Anoshim tzadikim. Doesn't mean males, because that's obvious. That's a Rashi. I'm just drawing your attention to a Rashi. And now here, of course, we have this pasuk. So what is going on? So the Rishonim and the Achronim all discuss this at length. Let us go through the various answers with the Maramakim, seeing what they're given. First answer, this is the way I learn when I do this sort of thing, is I first look to see who's saying this. So I first look 107, Tosfos Bava Kama Tesvav Amud Aleph. Okay, and it's a longer Tosfos, but this is a tzitut. This is just a quote from the Tosfos. The first answer says Tosfos B'nai Yisrael Kiblu es Devorah k'shofetes u'kemanhiga mitoykef ma'amoda haram kineviyah. Because she was a Neviah. That's why it starts off and it says, Udvaira, it's a Nesinas time, it's a rationale. Udvaira isha Neviah? Sheftes Yisrael Beisahi, I understand. We're not talking about any old Devorah. We're talking about a Devorah. How many women were Nevios? That we know of anyway, or at least that were Hutzruch Aladeiros, 7, right? And so she is, do you know what it means to be a Novi or a Neviah? It means you are an incredibly Ruchnistic person. You are totally above physical, any any of the deficiencies of being physical. You're Bal Midas Tovos. You're totally in control of every facet of your personality. You are misdabek to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Read the Rambam when Rambam describes how, what the Lahavdil Elef Adolos, what the ancient Hogwarts looked like. About how you Lahavdil Elef Adolos. Yeah, you don't just play a bit of Quidditch, and you spend a life of elevation and refinement and sanctity and purpose and kedusha, and then the Rabbinerseminar gives you. There were Bnei Hanavim. That's why I said I know I was being flippant by saying a Hogwarts. The reason I said that was there was Bnei Hanavim. It was an art. It was something that people aspired to becoming elevated and ruchniistic and distancing themselves from the being dragged down by all the things of Olam Hazeh until they were Zeicher to Nevuah. Remember, the Gemara says we had Nevi'im and Nevi'os Keflayim Keyotze Mitzrayim. Gemara Megillah Tesvav. Yes? We had 1.2 million Nevi'im over. But where are they? Only the Nevuah Shehutzru Chaladoros was Nichtava, says the Gemara. Megillah Tesvav. Only the Nevi'im, the way Rabbi Yerucham, the way the Bali Musa say it is, if you want to learn Musa, really, you learn Yeshaya, Navi. You learn, that's Nevuah Shehutzra Chaladoros. There's an eternal message in Yeshaya, in Yirmiyah, in Trei Osar, and it's relevant to us today. Al Kol Panim, to be a Neviah is not a small matter. She must have been an incredibly saintly and elevated and special and refined woman. She's a Neviah. Says Tosfos, that's the pshat. Chazal, this is how Tosfos gets around the problem. He says, here's the exact lashon: this is a woman who is zocher to have the shechina. So that's why they were makabel her as a shofet. That's Tosfos. One answer. That's the first answer. Okay, that's Tosfos. The next answer is the Rashba and the chinuch. Let's see the lashon. So first of all, we'll give you the headlines, and then we'll see some of the quote. Lamrot sheisha psula ladun. It is true that a woman is not allowed to be a dayan, but baalei hadin rashoim lahaskim b'neim al kabalosa k'shofet b'dineim. Right? There is a halacha. You look down here at Hilchas Sanhedrin, and it's actually paskined in Shulchan Aruch, although it's an interesting. There are limitations to it. You are allowed. Two litigants are allowed to go to somebody who is posel lodun, he's a korov or whatever, and say to them, you know what, we know that you technically are, but kiblu alayhu. It's a sugya, and it needs, we're not going into all the details. You can be makabel upon yourself, knowing that such a person is technically disqualified, but you as two litigants, like this is the way, by the way, it works today in English courts. How does the if you go to a Beis Din, you should never have that, but if you ever have to go to Beis Din because you're having a din Torah with somebody, the first thing any reasonable Beis Din will do with you is sign what's known as a shtar boirarus. Okay? In simple English, we would call it, hopefully, a binding arbitration agreement. And this now has, I don't know how it works in Germany, but in English, a court of law, this will be upheld, because what it means is it's a recognized ecclesiastical body. It's not just two guys standing on a street corner deciding what the halacha is, what the din should be. It's a religious court with duly appointed judges. So even though it's not English law, but English law will recognize that they have the status of qualified mediators or arbitrators, and therefore, if let's say you and I have a din Torah, we go to any recognized, let's say London Beis Din, go to a recognized Beis Din, right? And we sign a binding arbitration document that we will abide by the decision of the Dayanim, and the Dayanim give a decision and I don't like it, right? Well, one of us is not going to like it, obviously, and I decide to ignore it. You can then take me to court. Once the Beis Din give you permission, you can take me to court. How can you take me to court? Because you will then show the arbitration agreement and say, we agreed to abide by the psak of the Rabbanim, of the Dayanim, and this fellow's not agreeing. And that would be enforceable, now actionable in English law as a civil matter. You understand? That's how it works. And in halacha, there's a concept of kiblu alayhu. You can choose to be makabel upon yourself. Says Tosfos, we'll see who it is, that this is the way it worked. Because they were even though a woman is posel lodun, but Baalei Hadin are allowed to agree between themselves to accept her as a shofetes. Kach b'nei Yisrael kiblu es dvar aleim k'shofetes, quote, Kederech she'adam mekabel echad min akroivim. That's a lashon of Chidushei HaRashba, Shavuos Taf Lamed Amud Aleph. Says the Rashba that we were mekabel devaira in the same way we could be mekabel anybody who is technically invalidated, like a korov. Right? Finished. Similarly, when it comes to an inyan of shiltain, of authority, sovereignty, quote from the Ramban in Shavuos, Afal gab domrina b'sifri, Soim tosim alecha melech v'lei malka, Mekablim hoyu dvarei b'rtzoinam. Klal Yisrael made that choice. You're allowed to willingly. In other words, it wasn't imposed on them. What you can't do is, the Rambam says you can't appoint somebody. Appointing somebody means, I might not like that. But you can collectively decide, we wish to accept upon ourselves. That you can do, no problem. Okay, that's the next answer. Gimel. This answer is also from the Ramban. Another answer from the Ramban. Gimel. B'nai Yisrael kibblu es dibri nevoya ke'etzos she'al piyem ishtadlu linoig. They didn't accept what she was saying as binding, but menaheges, quote, menaheges, she was a menaheges. She was a leader. She'al piha ube'etzosa hoyu noyagin ze im ze kedin malka. Klal Yisrael, she had the role of somebody who gives advice. Gives advice. I often say this when people come. I mean, to ask advice. There's of course the saying, some people use, you have to be, after a while you get a bit smart and realize who really wants advice or who really wants just a rubber stamp, so Rabbi Robert said so, or whatever. Or as a comic once said, I think you may have heard it from me before, but it's worthwhile remembering. Some people use a rabbi rather like a drunk uses a lamppost for support rather than illumination.
Nice.
You like it?
Nice.
It's a good one. Try and remember that one. It's good. And there, I know straight away you usually can tell pretty quickly. You get, after a while, you can tell. You just want to, you've decided already, but you want to just be able to say, oh, you want to shift the blame and say, well, Rabbi Robert said so. Or is it genuinely not too sure what to do? Can we, and then, anyway, so it's an eitzah. To give people advice, you can give advice. That's what they did. That's number 3. Number 4, now this is an interesting one. This is based on a Maharatz Chayes. Maharatz Chayes says as follows, that she paskened on the basis of nevuah. Now this is to some extent problematic because you're entering into a very interesting concept. When do we allow nevuah to pasken halacha? That's only on a temporary basis, and if I'm not mistaken, I have in the back of my mind, I'm not such a big Talmud Chacham, but I happen to have been learning a tshuva in the Chasam Sofer a week or two ago, and I think it's a tshuva to the Maharatz Chayes, and he was critiquing his Sefer, and I'm trying to remember the number of the tshuva, maybe it'll come back to me, and I think he commented on this, because this is quite a novel and innovative idea. He's saying, says the Maharatz Chayes, that's why it says in the Pasuk she was a Neviah, because she was then paskening on the basis of a Nevuah. Now, a Novi is allowed to override halachas on a temporary basis. Certain halachas on a temporary basis. Eliyahu Bahara Carmel, it was Shchutei Chutz, etc., etc. There are, that, yeah? And the Rambam, this is well documented. And he says this is what it meant. It was Horas Shah, and it was on the basis of her Nevuah. Hoyu Mekablin Oisa Aleim Mishum Shchina. And that's his understanding of the Tosfos. That's the Maharatz Chayes' understanding of the Tosfos who go to at the beginning. Number 5, another reason, Mashadveros Yadonos Alpi Tzav Eloiki. Tosfos in Nida, Daf Nun Amud Aleph, says that there was a Hoyrasha, or there was a Baskoil, I don't know if it was a Baskoil. There was a specific divine psak. And we have to work out why, is that different to what the Maharatz Chayes is saying? But either way, there was a specific, look in note 113 here. It was Al Pi HaDibur, and therefore it was only, that's why it says, Ba'isahi. It was limited. It was Hirat Shah, only Ba'isahi. Okay? And there was no other shofar that could do that. So number 6, this is also in Tosfos Nida. She was a sort of a Eitzara Chochma, and she was more, gave them Maramakoma, so to speak. She was just a repository of information rather than being a actively, that's another pshat in Tosfos. And either way, whichever way you look at it, what do all these answers have in common? She was the exception rather than the rule. So it doesn't really help us for for moving forward. And tomorrow we will start looking at what actually happened in the early 20th century when women got the vote, and then it went to Palestine and the British Mandate, and they were trying to set up things, and then it went to all the poskim, Rabbi Shua Leib Diskin, Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, should women vote, and may they be voted for? And we'll look at their children tomorrow.